What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we'll be checking out the new Samsung Galaxy A51. Now, this phone, of course, is the successor to last year's A50, which was probably one of, if not the most popular sort of mid-range or budget smartphone, both in the unlocked space and with prepaid carriers. If you're from anywhere else in the world, that should come as no surprise, since internationally, Samsung's A series phones are pretty well known. But here in the US at least, the A50 was really the first phone beyond the S series or Note series devices from Samsung that was really widely popular in my opinion. So the A51 now has a lot to live up to, and I'm excited to see what Samsung did with this device that maybe positions it once again as one of the better, more affordable smartphone options. First off, let's talk about pricing and availability with the A51 because the launch of this phone was a bit of a mess. The device has slowly become available from major online retailers like Amazon and B&H Photo, and it sells right now for just under $300. Honestly, I don't think that's a bad price at all right now to start with, and by the time it finally reaches some US prepaid carriers, it's likely to be even cheaper. But for now, if you want an unlocked dual SIM or international version of this device, you can scoop one up pretty easily, and the prices continue to come down. I'll have links to where you can pick this phone up down below in the video description and pinned in the comments too if you're interested. There was also some confusion about the specs when this phone first launched. There's technically two versions, one with 4 GB of RAM and one with 6 gigs, though here in the US, at least right now, we seem to only have the 4 gig model, and that's what I have here. So with all that out of the way, let's dive on in here and see what this phone is all about. Inside the box, front and center, we have the device itself, and you can see that I actually went with the Prism Crush white color, which I really like. We've also got a couple accessories, including a standard USB to USB-C charging cable and the fast charging wall adapter. The included charger is 15 watts, so we're not exactly pushing the boundaries here with quick charging, but it's still something worth noting. Also included are a pair of 3.5mm wired earbuds, and these are not great, honestly, but the main takeaway here is that yes, the A51 still retains the regular old headphone jack, which is great to see. And finally, inside this little extra box that was hidden in the lid, you'll also find a SIM ejector tool, some paperwork, and a clear rubber case for the phone, so you can keep your shiny new device protected as soon as you buy it. Though fortunately, there are a ton of third-party accessories already available for this phone too. So here is the phone itself, and peeling off that last bit of plastic wrap there, you can get an even better look at that Prism Crush white finish that reflects off the light. And it's really similar to what we've seen in recent years, both with other A series phones and Samsung's flagship devices. And the other thing you'll notice right away too around back is that new square camera module. This was actually the first Samsung phone to have it, and now it's on the A71, the new S20 lineup, and probably more to come still. So love it or hate it, this seems to be how the back of these phones will look from now on. Before we set up the phone, it is worth noting that there's still a bit of plastic wrap covering the polished edges of the device. I know some people might want to keep that on, but I like to get rid of it so we can see how that mirrored finish really looks. So powering on the device and setting it up, you'll notice right away that it's a pretty familiar looking phone, especially if you're coming from the A50 or A50s. And speaking of those devices, I do actually have them too. Side by side, you can see the subtle differences in design. Obviously, we migrate to the Infinity O hole punch setup over the teardrop notch. The chin and bezels are a bit smaller on the A51 too, and like I said earlier, the camera setup is pretty different as well. And if you're interested, I'll dedicate a full video comparing these phones in their entirety in the coming days, so you can get the full picture on whether or not the A51 is worth the upgrade. The A51 itself, I think, looks really nice, but because this device isn't a flagship phone, we are dealing with an all-plastic build. Still, the polished frame and rainbow reflection around back give this phone a unique look, and I think in the hand, it feels far from cheap. It's tough to tell on camera, but there is actually this lined design and diamond crisscross pattern with different shades around back. Even in person, it's super subtle, but just something I wanted to mention. Although the phone appears to be just solid white, that's not actually the case here. Taking a look around, you've got your power and volume buttons on the right side of the phone, and SIM and SD card tray on the left, and that's pretty much it. There's no dedicated Bixby button or anything like that. Underneath, there's the headphone jack, like I talked about earlier, the USB-C port, and one single downward firing external speaker. Up front, the A51 packs a 6.5-inch Super AMOLED display at a resolution of 1080 by 2400 and a pixel density of around 405 pixels per inch. It's covered in Gorilla Glass 3, and I have to say, the thing I was most impressed with on the A50 last year was the display, and that's once again the story here with the A51. Coupled with the updated Infinity O camera cutout and significantly smaller chin down below, this is a phone that looks good from every angle. It's bold and bright, and actually, I think the color is balanced even a bit better than the A50. I don't know for sure if they made any significant display improvements or changes, but for me at least, I noticed last year's phone at times was almost a little oversaturated. I personally like that, but I know some folks did not. And this time around with the A51, it appears to me at least that the colors are slightly more accurate. Samsung continues to be a leader in their display technology, and especially in the budget space, I don't know if any other manufacturer can compete. There's also an in-display fingerprint reader, which should come as no surprise. And honestly, so far, it's good, not great. Setup is pretty quick, and you do get used to the placement of it. It's pretty obvious. Unlocking the phone can be fairly fast too, but I've actually had a couple instances now where the fingerprint has actually failed a number of times in a row. I don't know if it's just my fault or what, it probably is, but it's something I'll keep in mind as I continue to use this device. Spec-wise, the A51 packs Samsung's own Exynos 9611 processor, the Mali G72 GPU, and either 4GB or 6GB of RAM. Again, like I mentioned earlier, here in the US right now, there doesn't appear to be a 6GB version for sale anywhere. That might change at some point, but for now, 4GB is all we have. But that's actually okay in my opinion. I think performance-wise, this phone can still compete, especially with a relatively clean Android 10 experience right out of the box. The unlocked and international versions of this phone don't have all that much pre-installed, mostly just Google's own suite of apps and Samsung stuff, all of which can be removed, and overall, at least out of the box, you're getting a very smooth experience. You of course have to keep in mind that this isn't a flagship phone after all, but for a vast majority of people during everyday use, the specs should be more than fine, even with some light gaming. Powering this phone is a 4000 mAh battery, which is on par with similar mid-range devices like the Realme X2 and Xiaomi Mi 9T, and in the coming days, I'll be really interested to see how the battery performs when I put this phone to the test. The only other thing I want to mention before we get to the cameras is that single external speaker. This is a situation where, yes, it's mostly fine, but I wish Samsung offered a little more here because it's one element where you can really tell this phone isn't a flagship device. So let's talk about what's new with all of these cameras around back. We've now got a 4-lens setup, which includes a 48 megapixel main shooter, a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens, the 5 megapixel depth sensor, and a new and sort of random 5 megapixel macro lens. Beyond that new macro lens, everything else with the camera hardware and software is pretty much what you'd expect. There's live focus, the wide angle shots are handy, there's night mode, even 4K video recording. But that macro lens is just a really strange addition. I guess in certain situations, getting the chance to take clear shots of a small subject might be helpful. But is that more useful than a telephoto lens? I'm not so sure about that. Up front, the selfie camera can also shoot 4K video, which is really impressive on a budget phone like this. And while it's not exactly a wide angle setup, you can sort of zoom out ever so slightly to fit more in the frame if you need to. All in all, I think the A51 has a lot going for it, and I am really excited to try this phone out over the next couple of days and see if it lives up to the hype. I think it has the potential, once again, to sort of be the top dog in the budget and mid-range space, but the A71, which just came out out to might be an even better option. And yes, I will be checking out that phone in just a couple of days. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Let me know all your thoughts on the A51 in the comments down below, especially if you're thinking about picking this phone up. Also, be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.